Amazing. We're live. Welcome, Reid.
Glad to be here, Mark.
Awesome. I'm really excited to have this conversation and just like some quick context of how we got connected. So about a couple of weeks ago, I saw this awesome post by Bonnie, who is one of the recruitment leaders at Zapier, who was basically talking about how Zapier is starting to filter for AI fluency. And I was like, hey, I would love to talk to you about this in the podcast. And she was like, actually, you should talk to Reid, who is one of the PMs leading AI at Zapier. We got connected, we chatted, and then we ended up finding another rabbit hole that was like equally exciting for all of us, which is around MCPs. And yeah, I think probably the best place to get started here is the word MCP gets thrown around a lot. And I think a lot of product leaders are still kind of in that phase of like, is this a buzzword? Is this useful? So maybe I think what would be most helpful to start is if you're a product leader, you're hearing the term MCP, and you're considering maybe adding it to your product, what are some questions on some things that you should know about this concept do you think are important to get started and actually deliver value for the customers?
Yeah, that's a fun one. Let's dive in. So I think first off, some people ask me if they need to know like the technical details of MCP and everything there. And you maybe do as you start to get building, but at the very essence of it, this is really where things are moving towards to allow AI apps and AI systems to connect to tools. That is simply it, right? It's the AI integration method, essentially. Like really what I get excited about when it came to MCPs finally taking off. Anthropic launched them like late last year to crickets, quite honestly. And then a couple months in my opinion, it was like Cursor adding support for MCPs, started to illuminate some use cases for a technical audience that then just started to like catch on. And then just there was more and more unification. And what excites me about that is the fact that as the industry has agreed on a standard, like Sam Altman was out there being like, yes, we're going to do MCPs. And they actually did. And they did in the API, they did in ChatGPT. And that's incredible. It just means there's going to be like momentum on building for this new way of connecting AI apps, right? And so for product leaders,
and by the way, the reason why it's a big deal for Sam Altman to say yes is because basically this protocol was invented by Anthropic. And then the fact that he was able to say, hey, like our competitor is right. And we're only not going to say they're right, but we're also going to adopt this thing that our competitor is a big deal, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It was interesting to see them like live through some of what they profess as their ethics of doing that, which was cool. But yeah, from a product leader standpoint, you now need to think about like, where does your app coexist with AI apps and what does that intermingling mean? Because really what we start to see happen is MCPs allow two sides, essentially. I mean, people often describe it as like the USB and USB-C standard is the way where there's ports to plug things into and cords that you have to plug in, right? Probably USB-C stick is the best way to think about it. But anyway, as a product leader, there's two sides. One is where in your entire product stack do you want to enable your users to use tools in your app? Typically, we see that being like when folks have their own agents, folks have their own copilots, or their own AI-assisted automation type stuff, where they're like, yes, these are great points where our users could bring their own tools in and we can communicate with them. So if there's like, you want to allow users to bring HubSpot MCP into your Copilot to be able to, at that moment, talk to their customer CRM. If that's going to help your app, that's a great opportunity to be building. And the critical term is MCP client support. That's when you are building support for your users to bring tools to you. The other side of MCP, the like USB stick side of it, is MCP server. And this is where product leaders today are building or putting their teams to build the ability for their users to use their app in other destinations, right? They're like, hey, our app now comes with a USB stick. Take it everywhere you go forth and prosper. That's like the MCP server journey. And you could see companies like Atlassian with an MCP server. And at this point, there's like hundreds, if not thousands, of official ones at this point.
Just to clarify the definitions, because I think that was a really important point that you just made. So around like terminology. So we've got MCP clients, and then we have MCP servers. So in the example of me using Claude to, let's say, pull in data from HubSpot into something that I do in Claude using MCP, the HubSpot team would have to build an MCP server that allows that data to then be pulled into another tool. And then the Claude team has to build an MCP client that allows us to then integrate with the MCP server. Am I using the right terms as far as like you use them?
Yep. Yeah. And again, it's kind of like USB-C ports versus USB-C dongles on a stick, right? Actually, you should figure out what that term is. Whatever the end of like that like the thing that made our life better
port.
by not having to worry if it was upside down. Well, the port is the receiving one, right? Like, what is the other end of that?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's going to bug me. I'm going to have to look that up.
In the world of, I know, hardware, there used to be terms that didn't age well, let's say. But anyway, but yes, that is essentially.
And so just to continue, and Mark, then feel free to go where you were going to go with it, but just one more definitional clarification. Some people listening have probably tinkered with the Zapier MCP. Is that a Zapier MCP server? Or is that a Zapier MCP? Okay. So Zapier will basically, let's say one of the things I get access to through the Zapier MCP server is maybe the HubSpot server. So it's like the HubSpot server connects to the Zapier server, as well as maybe 10 other tools that I use. Their servers connect to the Zapier MCP server. And then all I have to do is integrate the one MCP server, which is the Zapier one, and I get like 10 for one.
Kind of. You're close. What Zapier MCP server does today, you're touching on something that if folks are listening and they're like, yeah, I'd love that, hit me up right away, pause recording, find me on LinkedIn, message me. If what Ben just said, you're like, I need that. But what we do today, so Zapier is a platform of 8,000 apps, 30,000 searches and actions. What Zapier MCP does is it takes all of those like searches and actions from Zapier and allows users to create their own MCP servers that contain any combination of those searches and actions, so that then as they're using tools like Cursor or Claude that have MCP client support, they can give their AI apps like the tools that they need to get the job done. And not only that,
so it's like a way to almost like bootstrap an MCP server where it didn't exist, where the company that has a direct like maybe API has not explicitly built their own MCP server. So I could use Zapier to bootstrap my own MCP server by just leveraging like a traditional API connection?
Yeah. Actually, you nailed it. And a number of our partners do promote, if you want to use our app via MCP connection, check out Zapier. Like, here's how to do that. And there's other stuff that we do under the hood that makes things like easier for users. For instance, like we have something that we call the resolver, I'll put air quotes, that essentially like uses our own models intelligence or usage AI system intelligence to like actually figure out what value should be there for the underlying API requests. Because sometimes things are like easier, such as like the text of a Slack message is going to be relatively easy for a system to figure out what should be there based on your intent. But when it starts to become things like the channel ID, or when it comes things like Jira is a great example as well that they would know, but there's ones where if you select a project, within that project, there's like the different issue types that it might have. And there might be custom ones. And within that, there's like a whole nested world of stuff that occurs. And so Zapier, one of the cool things is our MCP server, all you need to give it is a natural language instruction, and it'll convert that to the underlying API request for you. And you can constrain it. You could give it guardrails on only do these Slack channels and pick when it's runtime. So there's a lot of configuration on top of that is also just like makes it so much easier to get going with. Because other times, like you'll give it and it won't execute it properly because it doesn't really know how the API request needs to be formatted. But that's one of the things that's Zapier's bread and butter, right? Is like living and breathing and making that simple. So yeah, that's the Zapier MCP server side of things. We launched that about 2 or 3 months ago now, and we've seen just like incredible adoption of that to the point where that's why I'm working on it now. For context, I guess my role is like, I'm an ambiguous person internally. I get to float where projects are needed and need extra effort, essentially, or need some like R&D pushing. And so when on the Zapier MCP side, I was like, all right, Reid, you're going to lean in here and try to help out as much as I can. So yeah, it's been really cool to see. But going back to what product leaders should be thinking about, so I think hopefully it's now clear on the distinction between clients and servers. Honestly, the top question I then get is like, how do I get into Claude? How do I get into all these like integration marketplaces that are emerging.
Yeah.
And I think
maybe even before we get there, like, why do you think like product leaders should care and be like, hey, like, I need to prioritize this. I need to be familiar with this. Like, why do you think it's like almost like, what's the pitch to like, hey, stop whatever you're doing and like figure out if I should be working on this or not?
Yeah, and that also seems like it's the perfect kind of prequel to what you were about to say, Reid, because like before they come and ask you, how do I get into Claude? There's got to be a light bulb moment that goes off to them for like why this is a good thing for them to do. So I think I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, what Marc was saying.
Good point. I think it's probably your user behavior is what I would follow. Like for us, we observe our users are dramatically quickly adopting AI tools. Like it is becoming that category of apps is quickly becoming more and more significant for our users. Like we know that's what they're using. Point two, we know that a number of our existing partners in our ecosystem are also like transitioning to become AI first apps, right? I'm sure everybody here can close their eyes and think about the last announcement from probably 2 days ago from some SaaS company that was like, we're now .ai, or like AI is it's almost a meme at this point. So if you're a company that you're listening and you're like, yeah, that sounds relevant, that sounds like us. Our users do constantly ask us about the like AI and agents, and that is what our company's priorities are. Then you need to be thinking about this, because this is like really truly the future of like how those systems are going to communicate with the world. And if your user base is like living and breathing in tools like ChatGPT and Claude and Cursor, and you're not making it easy for your users to use your app's capabilities where they're doing their work, that's risky, because there's going to be a competitor that does have a great solution there. There's going to be like just reasons that it's going to be better with someone else if that's the future of how they're working. The other side, that's like the synchronous story that's a bit easier to understand, like actively using ChatGPT, actively using Claude. I mean, ChatGPT this last week did announce agents, right? And with other tools, just in broadly the agent definition, the agents are also the ones using MCPs, right? That is at the underlying thing. It is like a tool to enable AI agents. And with that, you start to think about everything running in the background for a business. If that starts to become more and more dependent on agents as the operators for a business, and the tools that agents need to live in an MCP standard, then if their port on their little agent bodies is only USB-C inputs, and your business is sitting there being like, we don't offer USB-C, we've got the other USB-C that you probably don't know the name of, and you can get a converter, it gets a bit funky. So you really do want to think about what is your approach to where your customers are going to be building with and what they're doing.
So an example there is if I want my agent to be able to, I don't know, people use the booking flights example all the time. So let's just go with that. So if I want to book a flight on booking.com, and booking.com has not invested in any sort of MCP server, then the agent has to use something that is like either browser based, so it has to click around and find things like in that clunky way, or has to rely on some more traditional API integration. Which, can you just like comment for a second about are API integrations simply like regular USB versus MCP servers, or like USB-C in the example that you shared, or would you describe it differently in the analogy?
That is partly the case, because MCPs do like the underlying stuff that they do offer gets more into the how and the why for connection capabilities. So the way that the standard is designed, there's like stuff within that just makes it, I'll say, possible for an agent to use them as tools, right? The industry has been driving towards like tool use for agents for a while now. And this is the first standard that at least has wide acceptance that seems to be giving a good results with allowing an agent to actually use some of these tools. But it's not like a standard. It's not the same as like your API schema that's there. It does operate and look differently under the hood for that. That makes it easier for an agent to like, oh, this is how I'm going to choose which tool to use. This is what I need to be doing with this tool. The other side of that is companies are beginning to offer AI optimized capabilities that are only in their MCP servers. And this, in my opinion, this is starting to be like what A to A could have been, right? Because if you start to see this, then if you have a copilot capability, like I think HubSpot's copilot could be an example here, like HubSpot copilot being able to hit that via a HubSpot MCP server is pretty cool, because now you might not even need to hit a specific find contact tool in HubSpot or find company, right? It's just straight up, hey, I'm I'm random company's app, and my user added a HubSpot server. They want to do something with CRM. I'm not even going to, like, my system, my agent isn't going to even bother like trying to navigate all the nuances of the tools. Let's just straight up hit up HubSpot Copilot and have HubSpot Copilot tell us how we need to get this done. So it starts to create that like cool world of like agent to agent capabilities that, yeah, anyway. So things like that. And again, going back to like, if you're listening to this as someone with the product, it's like, where in my app does that make sense? And should my app communicate with other apps and the agents that other apps are built, and where and why? Yeah. And to your thing on like, is it just AP? I get the question a lot about, are MCPs just a wrapper on APIs? And the answer is potentially, right? But I think they do come with more nuance. Again, the how and the why in particular, and stuff like that. And I guess I should give a shout out to Zapier stuff. If you're really not sure about this, like really just try your app's usage in Zapier MCP is the fastest way to get that, because literally, I mean, it works with private apps too. And I'm not a developer, and it takes me like 10 minutes to build a Zapier integration at this point from an API doc with Cursor. So very confident anyone listening can do that. And then once you do, you can literally spin up a Zapier MCP server with your app and test it out.
Do you think, so some context about myself. So I used to work at Asana, and for the last maybe like 2 years in my Asana journey, I worked in our developer platform and also building integrations. And one of the big things when clients or potential customers were evaluating Asana versus other tools is they would look at the key integrations with other enterprise tools. For example, how good is the Asana integration with Salesforce compared to maybe Jira's or Rike or Monday.com? And that was actually like a pretty big deciding factor for those big enterprises, especially if you integrated well with a tool that was especially tightly connected to revenue. So I'm curious, do you think like in the future, like MCPs could become like that deciding factor for some of those like B2B tools of which one do I go with depending on the quality of the MCP? Or do you think it's one of those things that it's going to be commoditized because they're all similar in the way they operate? Like how much power can product leaders have in creating the MCP experience for their tools?
Yeah. There's two sides to keep in mind for that. Number one, it's if I'm evaluating software today, and there's a use case for me to be using tools within that software. Number one is like, can I use my other tools in this app? Like Gmail with Google Workspace would be an interesting example, right? With Gemini there. In theory, like I could imagine, like I'm doing stuff with Claude, the chatbot, that I would love to do in Gemini, in Gmail, like right context, right place. Like if I can give it all my tools to do things in to-do lists and search across, pull Glean search into a simple like agent command and put that into that environment, that'd be great, right? So you could start to see worlds in which you, at least as a purchaser, that is going to become like a more AI advanced purchaser. And to be clear, they're becoming advanced because the number one consumer app in the world for AI is getting more advanced with tool use, right? As that happens, as Claude does better and pushes ChatGPT to get better, your users are going to become experienced with tool use and want this in more places. So that's like side number one. How are the tools that I'm purchasing making tool use easy for within their apps, right? And product leaders are right there. That is like a very untapped world at the moment. There are some that are doing that very well. It's very messy at the moment, to be clear. Like there's folks like Builder.io that are doing actually a really good job with MCP client and like surfacing things. You can look at what Claude has done with their integration directory now. OpenAI's Playground is another one where you can see how they surface MCPs and make it easy to experiment with MCPs via OpenAI's API in their Playground. So there's right now, it's not And it's annoyingly complicated right now. OAuth is pretty horrible. Like it's the ways different companies have implemented OAuth into MCP is not clean at the moment. So I would be thinking about, especially depending on the sophistication of your user, just like how clean is your MCP experience to discover, like, because your users probably don't care about MCP. They want to know about, I need HubSpot data here, right? Help me find that and make that super simple. Or I need Calendly actions here. How can I do that? And making that super easy to discover. So again, that's more like the client side, right? What can you be doing to build a client in the right place that has the right experience and makes tool discovery and use simple? Like for me, like Workspace, like I wish Gemini and that right in Gmail, I could just plop some notes down to it and it's just going to take those actions and run. That'd be sick. That's not there. Where do those things make sense for your app? Next, like Product Board, another one where I'm like, I wish as I'm in Product Board, I could search and be like, hey, was this in any of my recent meetings? And maybe it has access to like my database of research interviews. And I could just be like querying that just right there because it connected to that. On the server side is then that exact flip side, right? Which is if I'm using, let's say, Product Board again, what tools would I want to bring into Product Board? And do they have capabilities for me to bring them in via an MCP server? A common, like, all the note takers like Fathom, Gong, Brain, Granola. Again, imagine if you're like, yeah, I would love to bring my notes with me, right? I wish they existed on my USB stick. How can, like, if you're one of those companies that is like, should be on a USB stick, do it and why? Be really clear on that. And be clear on it's kind of a chicken and an egg on the destination side though. Because if you're like, we've got this great use case, like our users should definitely use us in like Databricks, right? I don't know why, but Databricks. And then you're like, hey, you'd have to go like, at this point, like, Databricks, are you going to do an MCP client? Because we're at that weird chicken and egg situation with MCPs.
If you're enjoying this conversation, please check out the links in the show notes to support the podcast. Marc and I do this out of love, but to keep it going, we also need your support. Thanks, and now back to the episode.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? Like asking the question is like, where should you start? Should you start with the client or the server? Is a tricky question, right? It's almost like if you want to retain your existing customers, maybe working on the client, making it really easy for you to, inside of your app, to interface with all the different apps you use, that might actually be add a lot of value. But maybe if you want to like land new customers, right? If all of a sudden you can take the leverage you're getting with ChatGPT or Claude, and then all of a sudden add another tool that makes it more valuable. So when you are helping maybe like teams figure out, hey, where should I start? Is there any questions or criteria that you use to help them figure out, hey, here, based on where you're at, maybe start here or on this other side?
Definitely a tricky one. I think, as I said, think through your use cases and figure out like, what is your like top either destination or source, right? And do they support what you need them to support? If not, ask them. Everyone listening today is probably like, if one of your like relatively top partners reached out to you about a cool opportunity for an MCP thing that made sense today, it's probably getting way up on the priority list right now because like it's a hot topic, it's aligned, probably something that makes sense to talk about, right? It checks a lot of boxes for prioritization. So I would say be the one coming to your like ecosystem or partners with that item, right? Because like figure out what that's going to be. And these things do rely on, I can think of very few places where having both client and server and it only needing itself is needed, right? Like you need others to play ball with you. And again, I said this at the very beginning, like critically for me with MCPs, the biggest thing I care about is that this is like a truly like unifying moment for people building with AI. Because if you go out and talk to 3 partners and you all build like MCP client server support, all the like thousands of other companies building MCP clients and servers today, all of that is like interchangeable, interoperable, whatever the word you want to use is, which is pretty awesome. But I think you need to find like, what are your key moments for something to launch? And who are those partners going to be? How are you going to work with them? Everything like that.
Yeah, it's almost there's a heuristic that's maybe emerging in my head, which is, and please poke holes in this because I'm trying to be less dumb by the end of this conversation. But there's a heuristic that's starting to emerge in my head, which is the closer your system is to something that's like a source of truth or like a system of record, the more likely it is that you actually dramatically need both a client and a server, like an MCP client and a server. And the reason for that is if you don't support the MCP clients for the biggest tools that are related to how data ends up in your system, then there's a gap in what people can do in your product that relies on their ability to leverage the data from these other systems that feed into the system of record. And then if you don't support a MCP server, that means that as people use ChatGPT or Claude or these other tools where they want to engage with the data that's located in the system of record, they will be limited in their ability to leverage AI to access the data that is in the system of record. Please poke holes in that, but that was just something that was starting to emerge in my head.
No. I think, yeah.
No, I think that resonates with me. I think the one thing is that maybe if you're a system of record, maybe you're less incentivized to create a server because you already know that's going to be like people are locked into your system. If you have been using Salesforce for, let's say, 4 years, 5 years, the likelihood of a massive enterprise moving away from it, it's a lot harder.
But I would say to Reid's point, if you're following user demand and user preferences and user behavior, if people want to engage with their Salesforce data or their HubSpot data from ChatGPT or Claude, and you're not supporting like a MCP server for that use case, then you're introducing like unnecessary friction for them to be able to do what they want, where they want to do it. So it's that trade-off, like to your point, Marc.
Yeah, for sure.
And on that point, on the system of record side, that's a whole hot topic that I'm sure many folks here are familiar with. It is an interesting thing it'll be interesting to me how that evolves over time. There are some mega system of record companies in the world who are going to start with MCP clients for that reason. I think changing the direction on that, HubSpot has done a great job, right? They've been really pushing on, like they launched an MCP server before they launched an MCP client, and a pretty good one from everything I can understand and test with. It's great. So Atlassian, same, right? Atlassian went out the gates with an MCP server that actually spans all of Atlassian, where their APIs were like individual product APIs for Confluence and Jira and stuff. They made like a Atlassian MCP server, which is pretty awesome. So I think they took an opportunity to be like, we know we have a lot of products and that can be very confusing, right? And how can we actually come to market now with something that will work with agents to make that simple for folks? So that was pretty cool to me on like how you're seeing some of the larger system of record folks take different approaches. Yeah,
I actually want to play around with that because I'm curious if they've fully integrated Loom at this point into like what's like, can I access like transcripts from my Loom videos as part of the Atlassian MCP server? I haven't actually even thought about that till you just said it.
That would be sick. Quite honestly, I want not my transcripts, but others would be, someone sent me a Loom. Hey, agent thingy, help me work with this as context. Yeah, that'd be cool. I don't know. I can ask that team. I haven't seen the Loom one in there. But
yeah, to me, it sounds like, Ben, I think your logic was spot on. I was just mentioning from my experience, having worked with some of this big enterprise system of record, they're very fearful. Like they make it easy for partners to get data inside of their system, extremely hard to take data outside of their system. And I think that's more of coming from a place of fear of knowing that, hey, that's like our moat. But I actually think it's really cool that some of these big companies are taking more of a proactive approach, HubSpot or Atlassian, than a reactive approach. And I almost like, it would be cool to start like little like investing index of like, what are the enterprise companies that are launching like a server-side MCP and almost like, I would probably put more money in those companies because I think they're like thinking about it in a more kind of like attack proactive way as opposed to a reactive defensive way.
Yeah. The thing to note for them too is if you actually offer MCP capabilities that do the job, a lot of the times this like data out thing is related to like RAG type systems, right? Like your embeddings, retrieval systems. And if you instead offer that functionality via an MCP server, you create less of a reason that a third party is going to need to like get a lot of the data out of your system if it's easily accessible, right? And you have less issues there, and it creates a better user experience, right? It's all around in my opinion, like a pretty nice win-win, which is rare, but yeah, it does come nicely. I know we haven't talked about some use cases, but probably I feel like I dove straight into like maybe more nitty-gritty of stuff, but
I would love to hear, to the degree that you could share, any really good, because we talked about people coming to you and saying, how do I get my MCP client into Claude, I think was the example that you used. And we just went into like a really deep kind of, I think, really interesting conversation about why they might want that. But you said that was like the first question you get asked. I don't know if you were something else you wanted to go with use cases, but I think that's where we...
The way I would think about it, it's something that probably blew your mind. It will blow our minds and probably our audience mind. But yeah, it doesn't have to be like a really cool enterprise use case. It can be like something that I'm like, hey, like I started using this for myself or something personal and has been a game changer, right? Like, I think that'd be really cool.
The first use case that I actually did with Claude, where it would like entered wow, this worked really well, and I didn't need to it just worked out of box once I had set it up. That was a nice use case. I was at a event in San Francisco, and there was like this little dinner that they had organized afterwards. And I arrived to this dinner, and there's this table, and I find my name card, and there's 8 other name cards at the same table, right? And none of the names sound familiar to me. And I had been playing around the night before with using Zapier MCP, getting a server access to Zoom info, calendar, our CRM, and some of our data apps to query for usage stuff. And then when I got there, I was like, oh, I wonder, I was doing that more as a demo for an idea. And then when I got there, I was like, let's try. And I just took a bunch of pictures of the name cards and was like, hey, I'm at this thing in San Francisco. Who are these people? What should I know about them? And it was like, well, let's check if they're current Zapier users, or are they current customers who have open deals? And it was going through HubSpot. When I couldn't find them there, it was searching them and using Zoom info to find more information about them. And then it just gave me this great report of boom, boom, boom. Here are the people to know. This person's an enterprise customer. Here's how their company. It was just I was quite impressed, because usually doing that sort of thing requires a lot of pre-research, or I would have needed to give it a lot more instructions, right, on what to do and all that stuff. But it had no instructions. It was just it had the tools, and that was it. And that really was I was like, wow, that was a really nice experience. If not the most impactful, it was just nice. It felt good. And a lot of the times working with AI tools today, you don't have a lot of especially at the edges. There's some of these where wow, that capability was cool. It was clunky. It didn't feel good. This is one of those ones where it just felt good using it. So I really like that. Then
by the way, for that one, just get specific on exactly what you did to set it up.
Oh yeah.
So does it sound like either you set up a project or started a new chat? I don't know which one it was. And then you just connected the Zapier server MCP and you authed. And then based on that, it connected to the sub MCPs and it just cooked. Is that basically what happened?
Yeah. So to break things down a little bit for folks, the Zapier MCP, again, can have all different searches and actions from different apps. One of them was HubSpot for finding contacts. Another one, Zoom info for looking up people. Another one that I gave it calendar, but didn't need calendar for this one. But things like those sorts of things. Oh, another one was data.
And you're doing that in Zapier, or are you doing that in Claude?
In Zapier MCP. So in Zapier MCP, basically set which tools do you want to give a specific MCP client. And so first I needed to build a little server in Zapier. It was just it's really literally just clicking a few buttons to say yes, use these tools with this off. And then you go over to Claude and you can select which of the tools it should use, or you can just leave them all on and see what it decides to do. So yeah, this was just me new chat.
So this is in Claude. I go to, what do they call it? Connect. What do they call them?
They call it integrations.
They call it
integrations or connectors. Yeah, one or the other.
Connectors. So I go to the Zapier one in Claude. And then when I am in the Zapier one, there's an interface that allows you to say which of the sources that you connected into Zapier are relevant to the specific chat I'm about to have. So it's is that what the UI is?
Yeah, essentially. There's a separate UI for Zapier MCP. Literally, it's mcp.zapier.com. And when you go there, you can have multiple MCP servers. And they're essentially just collections of which searches and actions you want to enable for a particular server. And the reason we have the ability for users to do multiple is the tools you give Claude might be different from the tools you want to give Cursor, which might be different from the tools you want to give to a particular agent that's using an API. So it allows you to specify a lot more in like the use of which instance you're working with.
Got it. Okay. A preconceived notion I have that I think you just debunked was that there's just one Zapier MCP server, which means whatever it has access to, it has access to in any of the tools in which I connect that Zapier MCP server. Or I guess, yeah. But now I think you dispelled that.
Sorry.
There's an element layer. No, but that's good. We're learning.
There you go. But yes, that is the way that, so that's one of the unique things on Zapier relative to like many other apps having an MCP servers. But it's because like Zapier is not very rarely is someone going to want to be like, yes, I want an MCP server for Zapier that just has Zapier stuff and not the underlying apps and stuff. It has come up, surprisingly, but it's not typically the main use case there. The other stuff... To
Mark's question, just to finish the example. So I'm picturing you getting early to this dinner, taking pictures of all the different, let's say there's 7 other people other than you. So you have 7 photos on your phone. You open the Claude client, like the Claude app on your phone. You go into a new chat. You add the 7 photos as attachments. And then you prompt it with, who are these people I'm about to meet at this dinner? And then did you have to do anything specific to tell Claude to like look at the Zapier MCP, like the data that's available through it?
Nope. Only nuance to share is that currently, at least with Claude, the connectors are not usable via the app. So I had to go to the browser. But it's really, you need to approve if it can use your tools. Essentially, it'll ask you, but there's a button for always allow. So I think the first time it asked to use a tool, I needed to say always allow. And then I think I had put my phone away and came back like 3 minutes later and it was done. That's essentially what it is. But by default, it like has all tools enabled. So even across like it could have other MCP servers and using tools, not only that I've enabled through Zapier, but all the other ones. But for my use case, it was just the Zapier one. But that was one of the ones I really liked. The other day I built one, something I learned from a customer that I really liked is, and again, I will say Claude has the best interface today for the average person to experience tool use with AI, period. For engineers, it's probably Cursor and Claude Code. They're probably in contention for the top spot for MCP tool use experience. But for everyone else who's not an engineer, Claude.ai wins by, at this point, almost not a race for that. And one of our customers shared an example of how they had something like 100 tools from Zapier MCP running, and they were asking us like about purchasing more and more quota because this was working so well for them. And for anybody that doesn't know the world of AI agent stuff, like 100 tools is really a lot. I think typical best practice is something like 30 is like your maximum, and even that's like really crazy to try to do 30 at once. So 100 was like, how is this working for you? This makes no sense to me that you would be wanting to pay for this. And when we dove in, it was revealed he was like using Claude projects, which was surprising to me because I had only known of projects before as being like ChatGPTs, GPTs, where you could give them instructions and documents, but they didn't have actions. Like you can't specify actions in projects. So I was very confused how this was somehow unlocking tool use at scale. And what he shared was that he was just using the system instructions, but in the system instructions, basically just giving it like raw text, like, here are the tools you have. Here's how to use this tool for this use case. So he was using projects to break down use cases so that then the model, when it was using a tool or deciding on tools, had a lot more information on which tool to use, how to use it, what to do if it hit an error. Like he actually even had like instructions on error handling for tools. Like really cool stuff that I believe we'll actually expect to see in the protocol in the future. Like I think use case specification and like sub MCPs will be really cool from the protocol itself. But he was using projects. And so I spun up a project for myself, which was like, it's a really simple one, but like my wife loves keeping a physical calendar for our family activities. Dry erase one, as unsurprising as like a tech bro with a black t-shirt like the rest of us on this call. I love Google Calendar. Like I live for Google Calendar. And I'm like, constantly like, is it in the, made a family calendar, right? Did all the stops there. But ultimately, one day I was like, you know what, let me try this project thing. And so I made a project and I wrote down details of like how our family like schedule should behave. And then I just took a picture of the whiteboard and it was like, it checked if these events existed on my calendar already. If they did, were there like mismatches that needed to be addressed by me? All the ones that weren't on the calendar, it like automatically added to my calendar or the Google Calendar, and anything that was in the Google Calendar family calendar that wasn't in the physical one, it like told me to add, which was great because like normally like that process of me adding that many Google Calendar events on my end would be like, I just don't do it. And then it ends up in this problem. But that was a great way of like...
So you were able to create so basically, if I imagine there's 2 events that show up on the physical calendar you took a picture of.
And like then 27, but yeah.
Oh my God. So let's say 20, we'll use a round number. So there's 20 events that are on the family physical calendar, and then that are not, there's no corresponding hold on your Google Calendar. You could take a picture of the physical calendar, and then it will offer to literally create those events on your calendar, and you could just approve that, and it can go and take that action. Like it has the agentic capability to go ahead and create those calendar events for you.
Yep. Yeah, I did really nothing. Like the first thing it does is it searches, right? It checks all my calendar events. And what's nice too about it being in a project is it knows which like if you use Google Calendar, you could have 18 calendars that are in your account, right? And normally within an MCP, or at least on the Zapier MCP side, you specify like you can search my calendars. But by default, sometimes this like my family calendar is named after my son. And a model by default is not like knowing that, oh, this should be right. It's a weird nuance. But in the project instructions, I could say, always use this calendar. And I can specify some other behavior that is like typical, right? What different acronyms typically mean, how I like things in Google Calendar. For instance, like if it's certain activities, I like to put blocks in my calendar. If it's in a calendar activity that is during 8 to 6, block driving time beforehand and after automatically as a rule. And so now, like when it was adding things, it like knew like, okay, not only should I should extend this event beyond what's actually in the physical calendar memo to reflect the preference of driving time. Things like that, which is really cool. Because again, it's different than if I'm scheduling something with a coworker and I'm talking to Claude to do that. That's a different behavior, right? I don't need driving time. I don't need it to access my son's Google Calendar. And so it allows you to construct these like use cases is the best way to put it, I think, unless someone tells me a better term. But
yeah. I mean, it's almost like the way I'm thinking about it. It's almost like you're onboarding an employee and you just have these SOPs of how they should do their role and all the right context. And then based on that, then that agent or MCP is able to better operate. And where my head is going is like, okay, I should just start recording way more what I do in Looms, because I feel like one day we're just going to have like a mega project that's connected to everything. And I think that context will be super useful. And I know we're coming out of time, but yeah, maybe and I feel like we'll probably have to do a part 2 to keep jamming on this, because I think this just got very interesting. But yeah, maybe two final questions for you, Reid. One is, where can people find you if whatever we talked about seemed interesting to them? And then the second one is like, how can the audience be helpful to you or the work you're doing?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's my best network right now. I'm one of the people who loved Twitter. I'm not going to join X. I like distinguish between the two, which I know is a rare breed in the AI world. I have a lot of debates on this one. I get in person with folks. Anyway, LinkedIn, Reid, REID. Otherwise, I'll say read like a book. The two things I would call out for folks in particular. One, I hope anybody listening, if you're like, hey, I want to like work with Claude or Cursor and use it, I hope that you find like the tools you're looking for on Zapier MCP and learn how to add those tools to a server and use it really easily. But for anybody that's thinking on the client side, that is, hey, we want to build a client and we want our users to find like 8,000 other tools instantly supported in our MCP client for our agent or copilot, hit me up for that. Would love to jam on that. I think that's what we're really working on a lot right now on the Zapier MCP side. And so excited to hear, and yeah, get in touch for sure.
Amazing.
Oh, this was awesome. I cannot wait to go tinker. I feel like you've got my juices flowing. I want to play with this calendar integration a lot. And if I could control my calendar from Claude, yeah, that would be nice.
Or just, I'm thinking, Ben, just booking our podcast, right? And like getting a podcast schedule, that could be a great use case for us to play with.
Yeah, because we've been using Cursor to collaborate too, and I'm wondering in a world where we could actually integrate Mark's calendar and my calendar and use Cursor to find times that work for both of us based on, I don't know, combinatorial explosion.
Yeah, it is cool. I mean, I definitely think about, can my Claude talk to someone else's Claude? It's like agent to agent, right? Is what Google was trying to push on. Yeah, it's a really cool future.
All right, we'll have you back, and by then I'm sure everything will have changed. So
thanks so much for joining us. This is awesome.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Sweet. That's a wrap.